Hey everybody. Today we're going to speak to noted picture book author Nancy Hartry about her wordless picture book, Snow Doves. What? A wordless picture book? That's right. This picture book doesn't have any words in it. It's pure illustrations. So why would you require an author for something like that? Well, that's something we're going to talk about, along with the benefits of wordless picture books. Before I let you go into the interview, let's take a couple of looks at the pictures we'll be talking about. Here's the picture of the kids feeding the chickadees. I want you to remember this picture because Nancy's going to be referring to it quite a bit. It's her favorite illustration in the book. Here's another picture of the children. While we're talking about things that children can learn from wordless picture books, I want you to think about this picture and ask yourself, what would I ask my child is going on in this picture? What sort of dialogue could we work on together? Now I think we're ready for the interview. But first, let's roll that opening montage. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that you're taking the time to be with here today.
My pleasure. I'm looking
So,
forward to it.
did your publicist warn you about what would happen during our
No,
interview?
absolutely not.
But you did get my sheet about lighting and stuff like that, right? But there was absolutely no warning about what we would be talking about or anything like that, right?
Absolutely not. It'll be a big surprise.
Oh, well, you're in for quite the ride, let me tell you, because these are not your usual interviews on Mr. Alex's bookshelf. You
Good.
do have a book coming out on September 15th, 2020, and that
That's
book is
correct.
Snow Doves, and we have our two protagonists right behind me in a beautifully illustrated book. What's the name of our illustrator?
Gabrielle Grimard from Quebec.
Oh,
She's very talented.
well, all we have to do is look behind me to see that. What's the name of our two kids back there?
Sami is the little boy and Joy is the little girl.
Sami and Joy. Did you pick those two names out?
I did.
Do we know a Sami and a Joy?
My daughter, we had a babysitter who was a Filipino, and she nicknamed my daughter Jocelyn Joy. So maybe that's where the name came from. I just thought she should be joyful,
Well,
and
she
she is.
certainly looks joyful and she certainly acts
Mm-hmm.
joyful in the book. But before we get into the book, there is a game that we play on Mr. Alex's bookshelf before every interview, and that's where your
Okay.
publicist really should have warned you. It's called Clear the Shelf, and the rules are
Okay.
simple. I ask you a series of questions that really don't have anything to do with anything at all. And you tell me the first thing that pops into your mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Fruit Loops or Cheerios?
Cheerio.
I'm hitting 2 for 2 Cheerios today. I don't know what is wrong with you people. Favorite breed of dog?
Labrador.
That's 2 for 2. Also, that is uncanny. It must be something with authors. Most favorite city?
I like Quebec City.
Okay. You sound almost apologetic for that. What's up with that?
No, I just, I mean, Paris, of course, is right up there. But in Canada, Quebec City would probably be my favorite city.
Well, if you had said Paris, that would have been a trifecta with the last
Right out
author,
there.
actually.
Paris for sure too.
All right. Well, when you were 10 years old, you wanted to be a.
Hmm. I'm not sure I had any ideas about what I wanted to be at 10. I think I just wanted to play.
That's the best answer I've heard, right? Because we push kids to be something so early. And we basically start asking them when they can talk, what do you want to be when you grow up? and we actually expect them to give intelligent answers. I'm going to write that down as the winning answer. Let's see how many people
Oh,
give
well,
me that
thank
answer
you.
from now on. What is your biggest unfulfilled wish?
I think probably, and it's probably could still happen. I'd like to live in the south of France for an extended period of time, maybe 6 months.
What are we doing to make that happen?
Well, we have to have the pandemic be over, and then, you know, maybe a year or two from now, maybe we will do that.
Let's sell a lot of books, right?
Yes, exactly.
Let's sell a lot of books. If you were an animal, you would be a
chipmunk.
And if others saw you as an animal, they would see you as a
These are very hard questions. Probably a puppy.
What type of puppy, and why a puppy? You don't strike me as a puppy.
Well, because I sometimes talk a lot, chatter a lot. Sometimes I can be pretty exuberant and silly. So maybe that's
Okay.
what. That's
Any particular type of puppy or a pound puppy?
Probably a poodle puppy. Something that's sort of, you know, bouncy and silly and chatty.
So if you were a spice, what spice would you be? And why?
Cinnamon. Cinnamon.
Oh, well, that's a very definite answer. Why cinnamon?
Yeah. I love the smell of it. It just feels homey and like baked apples and apple crisp and reminds me of my mother. So yeah, I would definitely be cinnamon.
Okay. Last question. So you call your friends and you tell them you were arrested. They immediately think you were arrested for what?
I'd never be arrested. They would be shocked and amazed.
But that's not the question. That's not the question.
They would think that clearly it was a case of wrong identity, because I would never be arrested.
Leave it to an attorney to find a way to weasel out of the question.
They know that wouldn't happen.
You know, I could redirect you and make you answer, but I'm not going to, because I think you have found a successful loophole. Unfortunately, once I air this interview, I'm going to have to toss the question because everybody's going to figure out a way out of it. That's mean, Nancy. That's really mean. You ruined the question for me. All right, but it was good. It was a good answer. I like it. I like it. Let's talk about your book now, Snow Doves. And for those people that aren't familiar with it, right, because they haven't gotten an advanced copy, why don't you give us the elevator pitch for the book?
So it's about two children, one in my mind, a Syrian refugee child who arrives in a new magical land, and he's frightened of the cold and the snow and the scary animals, and really decides that he should stay inside and stay safe. And a little girl knocks on his door and entices him to go out and play in this magical land, and he learns to love it. And they have no means of communication, just play and each other, and they make magic.
And this is not your first children's book, is it?
It is not.
How many have you had?
I have 2 novels and 2 other picture books.
Are they middle grade novels or young adult novels?
One is a young adult novel at Smokescreen, published by Tundra and in Random House, an imprint of Random House. And the other one is called Watching Jimmy, also published by Tundra and Random House.
And what about the picture books?
Jocelyn the Ballerina is a story about a little girl who has this little hand-me-down outfit that she won't take off. And that one has done very, very well. And the other one is called Hold On Mcginty, and it's about a fisherman who won't leave his boat behind when he has to go and stay with his daughter across the country. So he puts his dory on a flatbed rail car and travels across the country from sea to sea.
It's a beautiful book. I've seen it.
It really is a beautiful book.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful book. I mean, that sometimes I have no words other than that.
Thank you.
Getting back to Snow Doves, which is another beautiful book, which is why I reached out to talk to you about it. There's something very unique about this book. Can you tell our readers what that is? Or our listeners?
It's a wordless picture book. It's a wordless picture book.
Yeah.
It didn't start out that way.
Well, you know, this is the problem when you interview lawyers that are authors and authors that are lawyers. They anticipate all your questions, right? So we are going to talk about the process, and we're going to get to all of those really, really, really interesting things. But I got to say, it would kill me as somebody who writes to not write, right? So tell me about this process. What happened? How did this end up being a silent picture book? And by the way, I think it works beautifully. So I'm more interested in how you made this magic happen than anything else.
I had been working on the book for a number of years, and somewhere along the line, an editor said to me, have you ever thought of making this a wordless book? And which came completely out of left field. And I was sort of like, wow, that's different. And then I took it on as a challenge. And so I essentially wrote the book, in like 26 little lines of just essentially pictures. And when I read it out to my writing group, and we've been together for 30 years, they were skeptical. But when I finished with it, they said, wow, we think we like it better.
So when you said you wrote it out in pictures, what were you writing? Little vignettes, one sentences, two sentences?
Essentially the same story with the character names, but just not the dialogue, just what happened, what they were doing in the pictures.
So basically you were writing the storyboard.
Exactly.
So then what happens? So I assume you had a longer version of the story written. You pitched that to the editor. The editor came back to you and said, have you thought of a wordless picture book? You wrote out the storyboard. Am I getting it right?
So no, what happened was it sat for a while, and I circulated it to other publishers, and when I submitted it in two forms: the story, in the 700 words that I'd written, plus the wordless picture book version, and so that it would be hard to understand if you hadn't seen both of them side by side. And Catherine Cole, who was a editor that I had worked with before, loved it, and Second Story decided that they would publish it.
So they make the decision, and they call you and they say, listen, this is a great book. We really want to run with it. What happened next?
So Catherine and I had a meeting, and we just sat down in I think it was a French bistro in the city for a lunch, and we sat there with just the manuscript, which was the storyboard, and we went through it line by line, talking about what the story pictures could be, and whether the pictures were in the right order, whether we should make some changes. And in fact, we did that. So for example, where we've got the children, there's a scene where the children have sunflower seeds in their hands, and they're feeding the chickadees. That came later in the book, before the snow doves, and we decided that it should be flipped around, and that we essentially drive to the snow doves.
How much work did you do together with the illustrator, if anything at all?
Nothing at all.
Really?
At all. No. We've never met. I'm very excited to speak with her. I mean, I think she's done just a stunning job. and I'm very keen to meet with her and talk to her. But no, we have never met. Now,
See, that's
the
the part
editor,
that honestly it would drive me insane, right? Because this is a wordless picture book and somebody else is drawing the pictures. I'm a bit of a control freak, right? I admit it freely. This is my thing. I like to control everything. I can't imagine why. But how do you, as an author who's used to writing words, and yes, obviously your books get illustrated, right? You do relinquish some of that control, but here it's a lot of control that you're giving up. How did that sit with you?
it was really easy because I had absolute and complete confidence in Catherine Cole as my editor. I mean, she's an artist in her own right, and I just had every confidence that she knew what she was doing.
And I have to say, the result is spectacular. So
Thank
your
you.
trust really paid off very well. So for our viewers who aren't really familiar with the process, what does the editor do once the both of you are done? How does the editor work with the illustrator?
Well, I'm not absolutely sure because, I'm not privy to all those conversations, but I think there's a lot of back and forth. She would have a conversation with me. I would look at some of the drawings some of them as they were in development, when she was early days, when she was developing the character of Joy, the personality. It was fascinating. It was computer generated as she was actually drawing it. It was quite something. So I would see that, and there would be small commentary that I might have about various things, personalities of the kids. And Catherine would convey that if she agreed, and that, it's just back and forth.
I think people don't understand how much control as a writer you have once the book is purchased by the publishing company. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Well, normally if a book is written and it's not a wordless picture book, you have quite a bit of control depending on who is publishing the book. Presumably it's in these days, books are written at a very high level, and they're usually well edited before they're accepted. And I think you have to trust the editor. I mean, if I hear something twice, I believe it, that these changes need to be made. So it's certainly a cooperative venture by any stretch of the imagination.
What's your favorite part of the book that you think came out the most beautiful?
In terms of the illustrations, I love the picture where the kids are sitting there and feeding the chickadees. I think that is absolutely beautiful. I mean, my vision for the book was that it would be a more urban story. You never discussed it, but Gabrielle's vision of it is, in my mind, is a very, Quebec rural take on the book.
Do you think the story works better, worse, or differently as a wordless story?
I think it's better. And I think it's exciting that children and parents can tell their own story. They're not tied to my words. They can have their own vision. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that it would be a wordless picture book when we started. That was the goal. But if the pictures didn't make sense, if we couldn't get the flow of it correct, then there was a possibility that it would be small words throughout, maybe 20 words, 25 words. But we were all very happy in the end when it became a wordless picture book.
So for parents that aren't used to reading wordless picture books, what kind of advice would you give them to help them through the book?
Just to play with it, just to play back and forth, to just relax and story tell. Just have fun with it. I expect it's going to be very interactive. The kids might take it, might be one of the characters talking back and forth. And I think that the story will evolve the more they read it.
Right, and I find that a lot of times parents are in a hurry and they want to get through something very quickly, not because they're bad parents, but because there's so much to do, right? So story times is sometimes rushed. And unfortunately, what we're losing is interactive reading, which is the foundational core of reading. That's how you establish a love of reading, right? What a wordless picture book helps us do is develop how does this character feel? Take a look. What do you see in the picture? What's going on over here? Tell me what you think this character is saying, because the character isn't saying anything, right? So it's up to the kid's imagination to make that determination. What happened between this scene and this scene? And really, there are very few wrong answers, right? Because there's nothing written on the page. And in that regard, you're absolutely right in that the story is evolutionary and that it can change not only from day to day, but as the child grows, right? The story can become even more complex. So the book becomes an evergreen of sorts, right? It evolves as the child grows, which is one of the reasons why wordless storybooks are pedagogically such important books. People think that they're easy to write. They're not. They're very hard to write, right? Because story arcs are much more difficult to tell in pictures, even though that's the way some of us think, than they are in words. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion with you. What was your least favorite part of this whole process? And I mean, it doesn't have to be a bad part, just your least favorite part.
Probably waiting so long, because Gabrielle was the right person to be doing the book, but she was very busy, so we really did have to wait quite a while, a couple of years to have this in waiting for this to happen. So that was the hard part.
So waiting for the artist.
Waiting for the artist.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, she's pretty spectacular.
She really is. She really is.
And you're glad you waited, I assume, right?
I am so glad I waited.
And now we're in a situation where we're all pretty much stuck indoors for a long time. So this is actually a great book. Who knew that timing would be so unfortunately fortuitous? What do you have coming up next, if anything? Are you working on any other projects?
I am. I'm working on a young adult novel that's set in Kelowna. It's an extension of a short story that I've written. It's a boy who he basically got involved in something that wasn't his fault, and he ends up on probation, and they send him off to community college to a parrot sanctuary, and lots of adventures from there.
Middle grade or young adult?
Young adult.
Young adult. So there's going to be a little of the sex in it, is what you're telling me.
Yes. Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, back
not much when it comes from me.
Well, I was reading a young adult novel the other day, and I mean, I'm not a prude by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a really good book. But I was reading it and I'm like, I'm 53 years old, and I read it and I looked at it and I'm like, there is no way I would have ever seen this when I was a teenager. It's just not what we would have done back then. It's a great book. I can't wait to rave about it because it's a really good book, but we've really come a long way in what we call young adults. I mean, I remember when middle grade was Encyclopedia Brown. You remember Encyclopedia Brown?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what we would call middle grade. Now it's like elementary. It's like the most basic of reading. So it's a really exciting world out there. And this author, I mean, by no stretch of the imagination was it prurient or anything bad like that, but I just looked at it and thought, wow, okay. And then I thought, the stuff they see on TV is nowhere near what this book is. So get your head out of the bag. Things have changed dramatically since then. So when these kids grow up, because these two kids are going to grow up, right? Let's say 30 years from now, and they're going to come back to you and say, thank you so much for capturing our childhood. What else do you think they're going to tell you?
I think they're going to tell me that, you know, that change and communication and is at the heart of relationships, and that in their very innocent early days as newcomers to this country or to this magical country, they were able to, between them, figure it out, and that those lessons they should carry forward in all of their interactions with people.
Are they still friends?
I think they are.
Why do you think that?
Well, I certainly have, and my family, all my sisters and, you know, other friends have old high school, you know, friends that are still neighborhood friends that we still know and hang out with. And then, let's face it, in this day and age of the internet, there's no reason that people can't remain friends.
My oldest friend I've known since the 2nd grade.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
there's nothing you need to explain to
40
him.
something years ago, right? That's a long time.
He knows everything. There's no explanation needed, right?
Actually, Nancy, that
when
was
you meet him, you.
Nancy,
when
that's
you
a
meet
little
him,
presumptuous of you. It's a her.
No, but in my case, that's the case. I mean, you just pick up where you left off, right?
Actually, yes, you're absolutely right. And she helps me with the blog. She's my director of education. She's been teaching kindergarten for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So I can't ask for a better partner on that project.
No.
Listen, will you come talk to us about that young adult novel when it's written?
I would love to do that.
And we would love to talk to you again. I wish you nothing but success with this beautiful book. I can't wait to see how it does out there. Please stay safe. The world is a crazy place normally.
It is.
Now especially crazy. And
it is scary.
Those of you that are watching, I'm going to stay and talk to Nancy for a little bit more. You can join me back at the desk right now, okay? See you.
Well, that interview certainly taught us a lot about how wordless picture books work and how much effort is put into them by the author and the illustrator. Together they make quite a team, don't they, to tell a wordless story that you can use to help your child improve their vocabulary and their reading comprehension skills. But remember, the reading has to be just like you would read a picture book with words. It has to be dynamic, interactive reading, where you ask the child things like, what's going on in the story? How do the characters feel? What expressions do we see in their faces? How did we get from point A to point B? You can also engage in pretend dialogue with them. What are the characters saying now? All of these things lead you to uncover the book and its details together, rather than read the story to your child. There's a contest, by the way. We are giving away a copy of the book. All you have to do is follow the link in the description box and it'll give you the full details. Here's a shortcut. You need to subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn notifications on, and also subscribe to the blog, Mr. Alex's Bookshelf, where we know that the word parent is not just a noun, it's also a verb. I'll see you next time.